Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So we had a little bit of warming up our bodies with some dance sensations, tuning into just the beginning of what the body might be telling us that we haven't all the time made time to hear. Any other observations, reflections come out from that?
I realized, because I got glasses recently, which
Yeah.
really needed,
Uh-huh.
because I have one eye that's nearsighted and one eye that's farsighted. So I have a
Mm,
warp thing going on.
yes.
And I realized that like my neck kind of shudders when I move my head around, which I'm doing a lot more now that my peripheral vision has been fixed. So it's like, yeah, that kind of linked in my head just now, like, oh, it's not totally natural for me to look around that much.
Yeah.
That was nice.
That's a super great catch to tune into, like especially your word shudders, of feeling the neck shuddering, or any other place in the body, of course. Like when we get that kind of jumping sensation, and it may be difficult to create like smooth movement, like that highlights for us areas of coordination. So that's kind of the like neuromuscular information. So that's a really good place to start. And tracking that there's like a backstory to all those sensations in the body, that like process of being aware of the way that not having the right glasses prescription impacted your embodiment, your sensations of the body in the past. I love it. Anybody else?
Rainy mornings always are a little sleepier for me.
Yes, that just energy awareness flow. Do you feel like it responded with the movement?
Oh yeah.
The energy going
Felt
up,
really
down
good
a little bit?
to do that.
Cool. Yeah, it's an easy place to start. Even 1 or 2 minutes of just shifting that attention inside the body can really help us organize our sensations and just be more present, more coordinated and aware. So thank you for joining me in that. As you guys get settled in, we can drop in for a moment of just kind of inward reflection, slowing down. We did our movement. Now we can come to stillness. So when you're ready, just find a comfortable position, wiggle out any little sensations of resistance that might be on the forefront. And start to tune into that breath. And just like yesterday, we warmed up that awareness of starting at the feet and sweeping up through the body. Go ahead and start synchronizing that same awareness pattern of checking in with the feet. And if you want to go slow a few times through, that's perfect. Just really let that noticing sensation of the feet wake up in the feet, and sweep up into the ankles, into the knees, the hips, low back, upper back, neck, base of the head, over the top of the head, down the face, and dropping down the shoulders, elbows, wrists, hands, fingertips. And just start to practice that. And as we each week build up our internal sensation of this kind of cresting wave, rising and falling, and we tune into being able to scan our bodies in finer and finer detail. So just keep processing that type of sensory information until you can kind of synchronize it with your breath, with that inhale rising up through the body, and the exhale cresting down over the head, down the arms, into the hands. Inhale, uptaking through the legs, shoulders, and head. Exhale, sweeping down. And see if you can just slow down that breath, so that you have a little more time to notice the fine details of what's happening in your form. Let's just take 7 nice long sweeping breaths, practicing that together. And it's not a competition to hold still or anything like that. It's just a practice of directing that awareness and building that pattern of checking yourself. So if the body asks for a little movement to help you know it better, feel free. As you've created that pattern and opened up the nervous system to feed you all of that information, you've told it what order you want to receive information from the space of your body. Now I want you to just listen back in, and certainly somewhere in you is trying to send a message right now, someplace where there may be a little bit of a pinching sensation or a tightness or an ache. Any place that pain is trying to draw your attention in, go ahead and just give it that attention. And so often we're trying to push through a situation and we're trying to not be dominated by our pain and to not be slowed down or distracted by it. So we teach the body to tune out and to reduce the volume of those sensations that are really meant to draw our attention. So just practice finding the source of the message and just listening all the way into it. And just like sometimes painful emotions, you have to have a chance to just say your piece in order for that relief to start coming through. Each individual part of your body is trying to collaborate with you. Just find those spaces that need a chance to say their piece and just give you their message. And practice listening in without trying to change it. Just being aware of how the breath affects it and how your attention affects it. Listening. I'm not doing anything particular. And then become more aware of the detail of the sensation. Let yourself describe it. If it's warm or cool, sharp or dull, pointed or spread out. And this is just part of the long process of really allowing ourselves to get to know ourselves and to listen in, to give a spot in the mind to connect all the information that we're taking up about the body with a body that is prepared to receive new memories and new information. time that we have entered this state with the body, that we've accepted the information that's coming from it, we have an opportunity to give it a message as well. You may send a message of softening to those areas, warmth or cool, whatever seems soothing, and notice the change and the effect that just awareness and intention can have in the body. And that's already opening up the curiosity of why that would be. Why does the body have that power and give us that power? And let's always wrap up those sensations with gratitude to the body for talking to us, for giving us the information that we need in order to make our choices day by day and to move ourselves towards healing. And even some affection for the body. Just some thankfulness to your body for carrying you around in space, walking you up sidewalks and stairs and pathways in nature. To your eyes for seeing so many beautiful things. To your ears for bringing you ideas and beautiful sounds. And just hold the sensation of loving yourself. And when you're ready, slowly let your attention come back to the surface of your skin, to your sense of the space around you, and return into the room. How you guys feeling?
A little warm.
A little warm. Hopefully it will not get too much hotter with the heavy sky out there. Any change in sensation from before we opened up to right now? What can you notice?
Grounded, centered.
Good. Glad. Okay. We're going to cruise through some of the ideas in chapter 1 at first to get started. And we're just kind of talking about the ideas of touching. So this is a profession where the quality of our touch and the intention of our touch is really at the center of everything that we're doing. So it's really great to get on the same page early on about just what ideas are you coming into this learning experience with already about touch.
Kumu,
Yes.
I blame Amazon.
No trouble.
Figure out tomorrow.
This is mostly a conversation, and you are welcome to just kind of read through. I'll have the book open to just remind myself to hit some of these places in our ideas, but if you cannot see and read everything, that is not a problem today.
Auditory too, so
Perfect. We'll just talk. Okay. So touching. I do a lot of just kind of coloring on the board as we go, honestly. So I'm just going to put kind of a central idea here. And let's start out with just taking a few minutes to throw our big picture ideas of what is touching just associations. I know it's kind of broad, but you get used to it.
Ideally, it's a loving touch, reassuring,
Mm-hmm.
and a connection between people.
Yes.
Communicate that way. You know?
Yes. We're getting into that fast. Some big ideas embedded there. Communication. Touching as connection and communication. What else?
Maybe a way to alert someone
Mm-hmm.
about what's in their proximity.
Yeah, information that can be pretty specific, right? Can go through our tactile senses. Right. Just to get this in front of your eyes. Tactile. So this is just kind of one of the more formal terms for this specific sense of touching. What else have we got? We had some ideals. We're not going to be afraid to talk about unideal versions of touch also, yeah.
Unideal would be controlling,
Controlling.
manipulate your body in a way that you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Violent.
Yes. I'm going to put manipulative. Mm-hmm. Just letting our minds wander.
Distractive.
Distractive, yeah. Tactile information is very loud to the brain that compared to other senses, like we can have a lot of attention hijacked really fast by tactile information, yeah.
Healing.
Yes. Back up into more ideal. Healing. Yep.
And on the reverse, harming.
Mm-hmm.
Affectionate.
Yeah, absolutely. We can communicate affection.
Sensual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sensual. Relating to the senses, like deeply embedded in that sensory experience. Yeah.
Stimulating.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about working in restaurants and
Mm.
being touched for multiple reasons,
Mm-hmm.
having multiple effects on me. Like it's someone I get along with, then it's kind of affectionate, but also telling me, hey, I've got a plate, and I'm like going by.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe confusing at times, but or
Mm-hmm.
really clicking together.
Can be confusing. So many different kinds of information.
Yeah, overstimulating.
Uh-huh.
Invasive.
Right.
It can be absolutely invasive. Let's think a little bit about, like, on a cultural level. Like, I feel like we did a good job capturing a lot about our own experiences and engagement with touch. And let's zoom out a little bit and kind of hit some of the ideas or like beliefs about touch that can be expressed, like whether or not we agree with a specific idea.
Touching minds.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is meant by that? Touching minds.
Connecting with somebody in such a way where you're deliberately reaching out to try to connect with somebody.
Mm-hmm. So we have almost like the literal idea of tactile skin contact, but also the kind of symbolism of touching that can be more like energetic or mental, yeah? I like that.
That you can just hug a child and do whatever you want because they're
Hugging children. This is an interesting area.
Yeah. Consent.
Consent. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't touch a black child's hair. That's not okay.
Sure.
Culture, or in any culture, really.
Right. That there's like an invasive aspect of like reaching out and grabbing someone's hair that like maybe people would have given themselves a pass on if the hair was a tempting texture, but that like when you zoom out and you think like, no, I wouldn't do that to like any adult that could push back on, you know, like that it wouldn't be appropriate in so many other contexts. So yeah, some awareness about consent. Good to bring that in.
But it's good to know that, like, if you're black, you're less likely to have lice. I read that recently, so it's good to be informed without presuming that you can have the information and use it at the same time to have a sensory impact.
Yeah, and that's kind of broadly applicable too. Of like that we may have people that are more in our inner circle that we would feel more mutual liberty about initiating contact with them.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't necessarily entitle us, or even like, you know, even if we were surgeons or doctors or whatever, we wouldn't be like entitled to just reach out and grab any person. That like a capacity to help doesn't grant us authority to help every individual person. Yeah.
Right, because you're at work and some guy comes up behind you that you work with or whatever, and he starts rubbing your shoulders or whatever without asking and talking about it or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unwelcome touch.
Unwelcome touch. The idea of welcome or unwelcome. And how does it feel to receive unwelcome touch?
You tense up.
Tense.
You feel invaded and you know, even though the intention is positive and nice and whatever.
Sure.
Wait, I didn't ask for that. You know?
Right. It might not be attuned. Yeah. Startling even.
Yeah.
And that's evidence of that tactile sensation kicking off something that's happening through the entire nervous system. That like we can impact a lot more than the skin cells that we're brushing up against.
Right. It can be an emotional.
Yeah.
Triggering an emotional response.
And the inverse also true. If the touch is welcome and inviting, we can have a big impact on the emotional system, the full nervous system. So we have some good leverage there. Let's get some ideas of like what kinds of touch exist. We started with there's like more sensual touch, there's more communication touch. I'll highlight those.
Well, there's grabbing.
Yeah.
There's there's tapping.
Tapping.
AU.
Like to get attention. I can start that attention. Yeah. Pulling. Yeah. We'll put that kind of closer to that coercive. Although, can we picture it being consensual, mutual,
Sure.
agreed upon pulling, the excitement of like a child trying to show you something, or
Touch that will prepare someone for their day, like braiding hair at the beginning of the day.
yes. Grooming touch. Thinking of like all the primates that came before us, using that grooming time to like increase each other's overall health, social status.
Yeah.
And bonding.
Building connections and
Trust. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Now we've got all of the neurons tingling in your brains that are connected to what we already have about touch, kind of logged into us. Good place to start. And I like this. I feel like you guys are demonstrating a lot of broad awareness. We have a good foundation to start with. So we could click on a little bit. We're going to dive into a little bit more specifically the professional touch, the concept of touching as professionals. Do you guys let's talk a little bit about what is a profession to start with?
Profession is somebody or something that you become skilled at and you want to earn a living, share your skills, and enhance another person's experience somehow.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, earning a living, that's a big piece of that. What makes it a profession instead of...
It's a valuable exchange.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. You're engaging in an exchange. Profession. What's the difference? Let's talk about the difference between a profession and an occupation.
An occupation feels less social to me, less like you're communicating constantly with other people with the same skill set.
Okay.
Occupation also just feels like emotionally more like this is just how you spend your time, not what you want to grow into.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
your,
good distinction.
Day job where you may not be going anywhere with it. You're just trying to earn money to go home and have a weekend.
Yeah, a way to spend a time, to exchange time for money.
Yeah, but a profession is something that you pursue and you try to grow with and increase your contribution to society, kind of. You know?
Totally.
Not that occupation is not a contribution; it's a contribution. But I mean, a profession is.
It's like you have more ranks in a profession.
Yeah.
Occupation
Sure.
is not just flat.
You're trying to grow.
Yeah.
And when you're doing a job, you're like, okay, I just want to get skilled at this thing, and then I'm going to stay there.
Yeah, and that's really key, that idea of like growth as defining professionalism in a lot of ways. That usually there will be a requirement early on in your professional career, whatever you're selecting, where for us, we have to acquire the license. We have to go through the process of doing the formal education. Like, you might be able to get a job that is occupational and just quickly train in a few days and be able to efficiently do the work, and without like a value judgment between like, should you have an occupation versus a profession, right? Like, different people are in different places in their lives, and it's just up to choice. But when you do select a profession, you're creating a sense of like duty to a certain collective pursuit, and internal like responsibility to yourself to pursue that growth and that evolving skill set. Yeah. And then let's throw one more term in there, vocation. How would we distinguish a vocation from an occupation and a profession?
Never even used that word.
Mm-hmm. I'll post some space here. So a vocation, let's just jump straight into the Latin game. The Asian, we've got that like kind of actionability angle already happening. This VOC is voice. It's the same as vox. In other places, it'll be it's kind of modified there to fit with the rest of the word, right? But it's the voice, it's the message. It's like what you are bringing into the world out of what's inside of you. So if you are feeling like an internal calling to touch and heal and to offer your natural intuitive abilities and your cognitive willingness to grasp all these concepts and kind of intersect that, you could be coming at that vocationally and still have a lot of steps to go to call it a profession. Yeah. But almost nobody will commit to a profession unless it feels, at least at that moment, like it's in alignment with the vocation. So just take a moment and kind of check in with yourselves. Like, at this point, honestly, I'm just going to take for granted that you guys already have the experience of vocation going on inside of you around body work. Like, you already put in a lot of steps and made financial investments to be here. Like, I'm going to bet that you already have this inside you. But take a moment to just kind of trace the history of that, of like early experiences with touch or healing, and just being aware of the sensations of your own backstory as that voice inside of you got kind of narrowed down and amplified enough that you would start taking those professional steps. Does that make sense? Yeah. You can share if you want, but let's just take a moment either way. And if you want to make a little note to yourself to just be able to catch any reflections that came up in that, it's fine. Are you guys already familiar with, before we dive deeper on this touch stuff, the ideas going around about like embodied trauma, or like the emotional context of chronic pain, stuff like that, like somatic embodiment? There's a lot of terms that kind of blasted into public consciousness recently that are all kind of swirling around this idea of like our ideas or our memories, our sensations being connected to the physical body in a way that we weren't talking about as much even like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Is that ringing bells for everybody?
Well, I read that book years ago, Louise Hay's book,
Mm-hmm.
Heal Your Life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they were talking about that back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Of course, it's always been, like, there have been people who knew it's one of those basic features of human reality, but I feel like lay people are having the conversation a lot more than it was in the past right now. And especially that idea of like trauma. We're talking about trauma in a lot louder voices in a lot of ways than was. So I kind of want to just pull in without diving too much, because we'll be able to unpack it more when we get into the nervous system more in depth. But I think it's important to kind of tap into that early on and start connecting this idea of like, why is that going on, and open up the pathways of access into our own bodies to kind of use that emotional, mental, physical body intersection to our advantage while we're learning and studying. And so like the big idea that I want to just pass on the front end is that the tissue of the nervous system is made out of neurons, generally, are doing the like big action of moving impulses, thoughts, ideas, memories, all this stuff, instructions to the body, are all having to travel on the neurons. There's a lot more going on there, where the nervous system has a lot of other jobs related to taking care of the neurons and supplying the neurons and holding the neurons into the right spot. But for right now, just thinking about neurons are transmitting information. It's like electricity, it's like a circuit, and it is running all the way out to every surface of our skin and throughout our entire body. If you were to take a human body and just remove all of the particles of it that were not neurons, you would basically have like a person-shaped cotton candy looking entity, because it is so dense with neurological tissue. And the tissue of the brain is operationally pretty much the same as the tissue that's through the rest of your arms, your legs, your viscera. And so the thoughts and ideas that we have that we associate with like our mental mind and our cognitive ability, a lot of that actually is diffused through the tissue of the rest of the body, like literally, that memories are logged, and specifically memories that are about keeping your body safer, that you might want to not have to like wait for a whole thought process to complete. Your body is super efficient at wiring these shortcuts where you can skip over having to make a decision about pulling your hand away from the stove, right? And if you like hit your ankle on a corner of a staircase enough times, your ankle will know about that staircase, and your brain won't have to keep making decisions about it, right? And it literally is in the tissue of the leg, of the ankle, of the muscles that are commanding your navigation through space. And so that's a really important concept to grasp when we start thinking about touch and all the information and communication that's going through touch. Like, much of it does not have to be processed in the cognitive mind. A lot of what's happening through touch, in our interconnection, in our emotional responses, in our physical reactions, is automatic or unconscious.
That's like the musician with their muscle memory.
Exactly. It turns out muscle memory and fascia memory and bone memory and all of the other tissues carrying a little bit of nerve fibers here and there all have their own memory, and it is just as high quality of memory as the more linear visual memories that we recognize as like our mental thought memories. Does that all make sense to start with? Okay. So as we hit this idea of like, we're showing up here because we already have some kind of, I'm gonna say, special connection with touch, that like you showed up with an internal embedded drive to check out what it might be like to pursue body work as a profession and to do the work to show up professionally and go beyond the occupation aspect and like really make a professional investment. You have this vocation inside of you, and it is almost impossible that you developed that sense of vocation without having something that's like a bit special about you and your relationship with touch. That on average, like students who enroll in a program like this have perhaps a stronger emotional significance of touch than would be like average in the general population. Maybe a higher definition, like literally you get more pixels of touch information than other people. And all these things are like a bell curve, right? Where there's like a normal, and then there's a ton of people who get more information and a ton of people who get less information. So you guys are probably in like the top quarter of people who process tactile information in terms of like how much tactile information exists inside of your body. It may also tune into specific parts of your story, of like your history. Sometimes people are coming in with like a parent or a relative, somebody close to them who was already engaged in a healing profession or medical field, or for some reason had some part of their story where they were introduced into the significance of touch in a deliberate or more in-depth way. For me, growing up, I had both of my parents were like really tactile. There's a lot of ADHD in our family, which is also like that high tactile registration is a form of neurodiversity, and also ADHD is a form of neurodiversity. A lot of neurodiverse conditions kind of overlap, right? And so I track about that a lot. And so inside of ADHD, like self-regulation can be really a challenge because there's so many impulses and so much information going through the nervous system all the time. And tactile information has that overriding effect. It's really soothing. And so totally intuitively, my family had already set up in such a way, and so I was coming into this environment where we were just always like in a cuddle puddle, and we were always like dumping into the middle of the floor and wrestling. My parents were like really young, and I was pretty like high energy. I had two little brothers who were super rowdy, and we were always just like wrestling each other, but also like mushing on each other. And I have really clear memories of like both of my parents laying down on the floor just being tired after a day of taking care of young children, right? And just being like, walk on my back. And for whatever reason, just kind of spontaneously, we developed this culture of a lot of communication about touch, where they would be like, just step like a little bit more like towards the outside of my back, like go a little bit closer to my spine, like that we were creating verbal language to deal with tactile ideas. That was like, I think a lot of people grow up with some of that, but I got to like have a really thick experience of having it be affirmed in my day-to-day experience, and also like the vocabulary that I was building as a really young child, that like it was super important. So you guys had a little reflection there of like, what is your history with touch? And maybe that's swirling together now of like, why are you here right now at this moment? How did this all come together? And there's probably been a sprinkle of this kind of cumulative vocational like narrative arc in your life for a long time. So that's a good place to start in grounding down into the work of actually absorbing this information, absorbing the skills, doing the practice, and deeply embodying your own experience and intention through touch and massage therapy. In terms of again, kind of broadening out what is going on with touch. We have some big categories to kind of drop into. So let's think a little bit about culture and comparing our base experiences with what was going on in the culture around us, and also recognizing like differences culture to culture, where in some areas of the world the number of times that you were touched as a child might be very different from other places in the world, right? So just drawing some awareness to that, we can discuss if anybody has an observation.
My mom was not much of a hugger.
Uh-huh.
She hadn't really intended to have any kids.
Okay.
I was number 3. And so I kind of craved touch.
Yes.
Because I wasn't really getting what I thought.
Yeah. The felt sense of the amount of touch that would have been enough for you.
Yeah.
Just not being
Not really there.
met. Okay.
And as an adult, I kind of had more of an awareness of the lack of physical affection from mom. I worked on it in therapy because of that, because I became aware of that. But, I didn't have any lack of touch as, growing up as a young adult, because I created my own new family,
Yeah.
and there was plenty of good touching going on later in life. But when I was little, I felt like, oh, this isn't good, because, the touch that, when I think back, the touch that I remember was my big brothers, kind of beating up on me and being rough
Yeah.
with me. So it's kind of a negative connotation when I think of my childhood. So I think I've had to spend my adulthood reversing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I love to hear that you were able to turn that like instinct about what was a more appropriate match for your needs into creating a life that met those needs and matched up better with that. Yeah. Anybody else?
In Japan, as you may know, we don't have touch so often.
Yeah.
I mean, in family, our mother to children, not so much. So very young children, the mother touches touch a lot, but growing up, we don't do hug or
Sure.
touching so much. So I think we have a inspection to other people inside, but we don't show the emotion or action. So it sometimes it becomes making some difference between people. So I mean, I love you, but you don't feel my love
Yeah.
because I don't show emotion or action, so you don't know that.
So it's a barrier between cultures.
Yeah.
What about within your culture? Do you feel like you communicate love and affection in other ways besides touch with your family and close friends?
For me, I believe the people who loves me or likes me, they have a inspection inside from the communication, not touching or saying some words, just find some tips in the conversation between them.
Yeah.
My feeling.
So would it be uncomfortable for you if you had a friend and they came up and they just gave you a big hug at the beginning of seeing you?
Yeah.
Like a greeting.
As a greeting?
Yeah. So in America, they do hug always. So I think it's very warm, and I like that. So.
It's interesting because I have a half Japanese dad who grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and just the combination of him having that quality of stoicism and still warmth, but it's a little distant. He still gives me hugs, but they're very formal.
yeah.
They're like, they last like 10 seconds. And you're just like, oh, it's a polite hug.
Great observations. Thank you guys. I'm wondering if anybody has any experience of what we would call explicitly spiritual touch that you would like to share.
Like laying on of hands.
Yeah.
Is it spiritual because of the experience, or is it spiritual because of like the place in which it was received?
That is a great question. Let's explore. Is it spiritual because of the place that it was received, or because of the intention? Was that the question?
Feeling like going into something,
Mm-hmm.
receiving the touch and being like, oh, that was spiritual, versus
Sure.
going into a spiritual place in which that's the intention from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So, I'd say I've experienced more like just feeling like something was spiritual because of my experience.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've been in situations where somebody would be in the middle of the room and everybody would just lightly touch the person with a healing intention, you know, just sort of send healing energy to that person. And that it's kind of formal, you know,
Sure.
because it was an organized
Yeah.
thing. Or you would put your hand close to the person and you just feel that energy between you
Mm-hmm.
and send positive vibes.
Yeah. Yeah. Has anybody like received a Reiki treatment? It's kind of one of the more accessible like energy or like spiritual body work techniques.
Just in videos, just
seen that.
watching ASMR videos, and
Uh-huh.
people kind of sending the energy out, and going through like different patterns of like prayer almost,
Mhm.
but saying it's not religious, just like for your
Sure.
highest vibrational good.
Yes.
Um,
For your highest vibrational good.
Yeah.
That's a useful phrase.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that one. That's always stuck in my head. And I think the experience of I've taken a lot of sensory information.
Mm-hmm.
Probably have ADHD. It's not diagnosed, but I've always felt that way.
You can always just generalize to spicy, I guess. It's like now
Spicy.
like, yeah, neurospicy is a
neurospicy,
phrase that's getting thrown
yes.
around a lot.
Definitely.
Like, I may not have been
that.
diagnosed as anything specific, but
Yeah, like I've sprinkles and
Uh-huh.
something. Cinnamon sugar.
yeah, I love that. Cinnamon sugar.
And so I think I actually am going to a Reiki session tomorrow.
Wow,
On
what
Christmas,
timing?
so it's great.
Yeah.
And I'm anticipating it being sensory overwhelming for me because I'm used to having my headphones on, being like kind of tucked into sheets and blankets and watching on my phone. So I'm going to compare what I go through tomorrow to that and see which one is more
Okay.
comfortable for me.
Okay, so you have like kind of a self-directed like energy work practice
Yeah.
that you already have a pattern with, but now you're
Yeah.
kind of letting somebody else into that.
And I think that's how I go
Space.
through life. I have to really kind of sanction out the energy I'm going to spend.
Uh-huh.
Because I have to, otherwise, I would just say the most random things. I talk about videos that I've seen, just like it wouldn't lead to anything.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's accurate.
Cool. I like it. All right, so some spiritual touch experiences in the group and some more coming up. I'll be excited to hear your reflections after you have that session. We've hit kind of the ideas of culture, informing touch. And we already did tap on some of the like forms of inappropriate is our official phrase. Inappropriate touch, unwelcome or undesired touch. And you guys pretty much hit the big headings there. So we'll break down basically 3 kind of classes of specifically inappropriate touch. So that would be, I'm looking at page 8 if you want to just kind of track that. There's a little bit, they'll break it down in a little more detail here. But hostile touch, hostile or aggressive touch. So this is going to be something that comes up when there's a power differential or a power play happening. So what is problematic with hostile touch is it's basically like an assertion of the value of one person's authority over another person's authority, and especially when that comes to our own bodies. Like the healthiest expression for us and for our communities, of course, is like the highest possible level of bodily autonomy. So there's going to be situations where you have like a little kid that's refusing to put on their shoes, and they don't get bodily autonomy in that moment, and there's a whole like spectrum of how exactly that plays out and how different people are going to process their experiences with bodily autonomy. But that when you get into that kind of bracket of the spectrum where somebody is essentially asserting that their idea about what another person's body should be doing is more important than that person's idea of what their body should be doing, that this becomes very problematic. And like, if you are raising kids, like you just have to kind of make that discernment as massage therapists, as professionals. That is something that we can basically completely set outside of our practice. Like we're just going to not allow ourselves to bring that kind of energy into our practice, that there's no situation where we're going to pressure either physically or verbally for somebody to receive a kind of touch or do a kind of action that they're not already choosing. And realistically, you won't have to do that if you're well attuned to the person and you're actually like informed and skilled and able to interface with them at a professional level. That will almost never be necessary. But you do hear stories sometimes of massage therapists or other body workers. And like I'll point out, there are problematic situations, especially with like bodywork practices that are not really directed at professionals, where maybe somebody takes like a weekend class of a specific technique and it's like you can share this with your friends, but they don't have the time to talk about the whole like ethics of application of that. And so they might leave those experiences with like, they have the technical skill, but not really the self-regulation to know when to use it and when not to use it. So you'll hear stories about these like people using phrases like no, just hold still, like I'll just do this really quick, like whatever kind of thing, where there's pressure on the interface, on interactions, where somebody is basically saying that they know better than the other person what their body should be doing, and there's like an ego conflict there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Erotic and sexual touch, with totally non-judgment for erotic and sexual touch as an experience. Like it's a really important key part of healthy human life. But as professionals in massage therapy, this is another box that we're going to kind of compartmentalize and set completely outside of our practice room. We'll go in more depth as we kind of loop through the different topics on like how to actually handle interactions with clients where there may be confusion or tension or uncomfortable situations on either side. But in terms of just setting ourselves up with our own relationship with our bodies and with touch and opening up to this professional knowledge, we'll just make it clear on the front end. The entire sexual touch box is staying outside of the treatment room. Also, invasive touch. This is a little bit of a trickier idea to understand, maybe. But it has more to do with basically like navigating the edge of relaxation versus like heightened awareness. So we'll pull this all apart more when we hit the nervous system as well. But in the nervous system, we'll just to kind of sum up and get us there for this conversation, you can think of there being like two really big pieces of the nervous system that are operating as like the gas and the brakes on the whole energy level of a person's whole body, and they're affecting every system. And so in invasive touch, a lot of times what's going on is basically we're like hitting the gas on somebody's nervous system when that's not our intention or like our highest intention. Maybe we kind of like in that moment we're like, it's fine if they get a little bit startled. And that's a personal and professional judgment, case by case. It is actually quite tricky because this is a more diffused edge where we can't all the way put the box outside of the room, if that makes sense. Every person's nervous system is different and is conditioned differently, and so things that might startle somebody are gonna be like not even wake somebody else up, right? So that's a place of awareness where like invasive touch is not so much about like, are you trying to take over control of somebody, or are you trying to get some kind of satisfaction from the touch and the interchange of touch there being kind of the problems with hostile or erotic touch. But invasive touch is usually much more a problem of attunement, where your awareness of that person's nervous system is not dialed in and you're missing information, you're missing communication from their body about what their body needs. So building in that sense of awareness is really important in order for us to make the best possible professional decisions in the moment. So this is going to require us to be really attuned to our own body, to be able to notice when we shoot our own heart rates up, when we change our own breathing patterns, when we pull away or have some kind of like involuntary muscle action to avoid a kind of contact that is not wanted or welcome. And to be able to flip that around mentally and be able to read that on other people really effectively. And you may feel that you can like do that more on an energetic level of just sensing the like energetics of somebody pulling away versus drawing in, and that might be plenty of information for most of us. We're going to have to use that and also tie it into a lot of micro attentiveness to the expression of our client's body. And so that's going to really inform and enhance your practice as you build up a sense of confidence and comfort with being able to use your own information to understand other people. So it's, you could almost think of it as basically like a amplified, like professional level empathy, where we're usually going around having to use information about how people are feeling all the time, and we're going to dial that